This is All of It on WNYC. I'm Allison Stewart. According to the Federal Trade Commission, in 2022 alone, Americans lost about $1.3 billion to romance scams. These people build fake profiles, contact people online, they build a relationship, and then they target them for money. Journalist Carlos Barragan became interested in these crooks after his mother fell for an American soldier on Tinder. For the record, there was no American soldier. After his mom was scammed, Carlos decided to attempt to find the person. He put his reporter skills to work and wound up in Nigeria. The result is featured in his book called The Yahoo Boys, Love, Deception, and the Real Lives of Nigeria's Romance Scammers. Carlos Barragan is a reporter and researcher for the New York Times in Madrid, and he joins me now from Spain. Hi, Carlos.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
The book started when your mother was scammed by someone impersonating an American soldier online. You kind of didn't pay attention at first, but when did you realize your mom was being deceived?
Well, this happened in 2015, and the internet back then, I would say, it was not as wild as it is now. So it took a while for us to understand what was happening. But definitely, when my mom came one day and said, Brian, who was supposedly stationed in Syria, is coming to Madrid to live with us, for me and my brothers didn't sound right. But definitely when she's told us that Brian was going to send some gold bars to our house, that sounded like it was a scam. The thing was that he had not asked for money yet, so we didn't know what was the catch. But I found out that it was a typical kind of scam, and I traced his IP email address. And rather than being in Syria, of course, he was in Lagos.
Why were you motivated to the extent to try to find out who did this? Because you did trace his account to Nigeria using your reporter skills.
Well, I wanted to write something about loneliness because my mom has always struggled with loneliness. You know, she's a mother of three kids and she has always struggled finding a partner. But I couldn't grasp the depth of loneliness in Europe and in America. But at the same time, I became very curious to know who these young men were because there was not a profound account of who these young scammers were. So I went to Nigeria. I tried to find him. And of course, as you might know, I didn't. Otherwise, I would have a Netflix documentary. But at least I found a lot of them that were willing to talk to me and tell me why they were doing and how they were scamming lonely people in the West.
It's a fascinating story, by the way. But before I leave your mom, she felt embarrassed. She's a bright woman, but she felt embarrassed that she had been scammed. How did she take the news that you wanted to go find her scammer?
Well, when I told her she was being scammed, she just pronounced these words, what a fool I am. But then later she moved on. And when I told her I wanted to find her scammer, I was a bit scared because, maybe she didn't want to, but she was quite eager. And she also told me, I still remember every time I hear John Legend's All of Me, I remember about him because that was the song the scammer had dedicated to my mom. And so she was happy I could do it. And now that the book is out, she's happy because other victims, they don't come out. They don't say this happened to me out of shame. So my mom was glad that I did this.
We're talking about the dangers of romance scams and the people behind the scamming. My guest is journalist Carlos Barragan, author of the book, The Yahoo Boys, Love, Deception, and the Real Lives of Nigerian Romance Scammers. We'd also like to hear from you. Have you or anyone you've ever been targeted by a romance scam online? What happened? How did you find out it was a scam? Our phone number is 212-433-WNYC. 212-433-9692. This is a judgment-free zone, by the way. Your story might be able to help someone else. If you can tell us a little bit about the scam, how did it make you or your loved one or your family member feel? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. Carlos, you call the Yahoo Boys. They're called the Yahoo Boys in Nigeria. How did it get that name?
In the early 2000s, the email service Yahoo was the first one that was widely used. And obviously, the scammers, the online scammers, were using this service. So now, if you go to Nigeria and you pronounce this word, they are not thinking about the American company. They are thinking about young scammers.
You said that they most of the scams originate the syndicates in Southeast Asia, but other major hotspot is West Africa, particularly Nigeria. Why is Nigeria specifically a place where romance scamming has grown into practice?
Well, there is a long history of impersonation scams that predate even the formation of Nigeria when the British Empire got to West Africa. West Africans got dressed up as the white man with white man's clothes to scare other West Africans out of the sheer terror some people, some locals had of the British Empire. And it evolved into many different things. And after the 70s and 80s, a lot of unemployed young men moved to what we know as the Nigerian Prince scam. And this kind of particular scam was targeting, rather than loneliness, it was targeting greed. And it was under the idea that an American would have to send money to a Nigerian who was rich but only needed a bit of help,
Mm-hmm.
translated in the of money. And then later on, with the advent of social media, and I would say also with the smartphones, they stopped targeting greed and they moved on to loneliness. And now the crisis, the economic crisis there is so dire. And Nigeria has more than 200 million people living there, that many young people try their luck with this scam.
Yeah, people might think it's a group of highly organized criminals doing this, but you found young men in Nigeria hustling to stay afloat. How surprised were you about the day to day reality of romance scammers?
Very surprised, because when you read about romance scams or any kind of scams, you hear from experts saying this is all part of organized syndicates, international mafias who are very well organized in a pyramid scheme. And then when I got there and I started reporting and interviewing young men, they were all freelancers. They were working on their own, and all you need is just a phone and maybe a help from an older friend who can guide you uh, when you start scamming Westerners. And it was a big surprise to me, because then the message was even, I would say, more dire, because I was expecting that the person who had scammed my mom was this very dangerous mafia. And that way I could accept why my mom had fallen for it. But the revelation of seeing a 14-year-old boy whose English is a bit broken and has no money even to eat, as one of the main characters of the book,
Mm-hmm.
Aziz, is. When you see that boy is scamming a war veteran in California, or a single mom in Ohio, or you name it, then you understand the depth of our loneliness epidemic. And that is a dire picture.
Let's take a call. This is Tiffany calling in from Merrick. Tiffany, thank you for taking the time to call all of it. You're on the air.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Carlos, for talking about this, because I've also have experienced this with my mom. My mom is a single mom, and she's been on her own for many, many, many years, and she also had experienced a scam like this, and had also sent money to, American soldier that she thought that she was dating. It was all on WhatsApp, and then, years went on where she thought that it was a real thing. She thought he was going to come, live with us, and she really thought she was going to marry him. But I'm just concerned. Is there any organization, or do you have ideas on how to go? How do I find her scammer?
It is very hard to find this camera, but like if you moved onto Gmail, for example, if you move to email, there are apps that you can use to trace their IP email address. It's true that other people, maybe around you, who are more familiarized with tech, there are other ways to know the location of, for example, their messages. I
Mhm.
wonder if their phone number is American. Um, but yeah, those are the few ideas I have.
It's sort of interesting in your book. I can't remember who exactly, but they realize they look like, and it's. She says, "Oh, you're 4,000 miles from me," but they have an answer for everything.
They do have an answer for everything, and that's what is dangerous, you know. For example, I would tell my mom before going the first time, ask them to do a video because they can't do a video, right? They are not a real person. But now with AI and now with certain
Oh
tools, they
wow.
can do a video. So I would be very wary of saying this is the way to prove whether this person exists or is real or not, because maybe as we speak, the technologies are already changing.
What do these people offer the people that they're targeting? Why did they
Well,
stay involved? Because there was one character in your book, they were involved for years.
yeah, and the case, the story the listener shared is very similar. What they offer is attention, you know. We are in the economy of attention, and we all know that tech companies want our attention to make more money. And around us, and maybe even ourselves, we are more lonely than ever. And what these people offer is constant attention. And talking to them, you realize how important just a good morning, how are you every day can mean to a person.
We're talking to journalist Carlos Barragan, author of the book The Yahoo Boys Love, Deception, and the Real Lives of Nigerian Romance Scammers. We're talking about the dangers of romance scam and the people behind the scamming. We're also hearing from you. Have you or anyone you've known been targeted by a romance scam online? What happened? How did you find out? Was money sent as part of the scam? Once again, this is a judgment-free zone. Your story might help someone else. You can also call in anonymously as well. Our number is 212-433 WNYC, 212-433-9692. In your book, you tell the story through the eyes of young men that you met in Nigeria, Biggie, Chibuki, Aziz, and Richie. What was it specifically about these four people that demonstrated what the Yahoo's Yahoo Boys lifestyle was?
Well, as you mentioned, these kind of scams also originate in other parts of the world, like Southeast Asia, where there are organized syndicates, and it's more like enslaved people doing these kind of scams. But in Nigeria, they're doing it out of free will, so they are facing moral dilemmas all the time. Obviously, the fact that so many young men, because it's you find a lot of these young men on the streets doing it. The fact that so many people are doing it reveals that they are not psychopaths. There are other socioeconomic circumstances pushing these people into this. Of course, this doesn't justify it, but it kind of like tells you the situation in Nigeria. And the people I talk to, sometimes they felt bad. Sometimes they would even brag about their riches or the money they got or how they were scamming the victim. So these boys were quite conflicted, and I think that drew me into their lives. And obviously, in the case of Chibuke, for example, he scams 80,000 euros out of an Irish woman pretending to be a WWE superstar. And look, I'm not an American, so I don't share that passion for WWE, but that drew me in right away.
What is the reputation of Yahoo Boys in
It
Nigeria?
is the Nigerians, the book focus on one small community in Lagos, so I can talk about that community. It's a struggling community, especially since the pandemic with inflation. A lot of people struggled even to eat. With Ashish, for example, his mom sells food on the street, and she cannot even afford buying meat for his 14, 15-year-old boy. So in Ikotun, the neighborhood, some people don't like at all the fact that these young men are doing criminal activities. They are tarnishing Nigeria's image outside with the stereotype of now Nigerians are scammers, which of course is completely rubbish. But at the same time, it pushes these young boys into criminal activities rather than, let's say, learning how to be a cobbler or learning how to be a tailor. And a lot of older people would complain to me about that. But of course, the picture is a bit more nuanced because these guys are bringing money into the community. And they would splurge the money in so many crazy ways, but at the same time, that money trickles down and it ends up in the pockets of people who have nothing to do with the scam.
Let's take a few more calls. This is Danya calling in from Manhattan. Hi, Danya. Thank you so much for calling all of it. You're on the air.
Good morning. This is Dana.
Dana,
And a friend of mine was scammed, and I'm questioning whether there are any female scammers scamming men that are feeling lonely, if this is just a heterosexual issue. And my friend who was scammed, we talked all the time about it being a scammer, and she did have video calls, like you mentioned, with him, which made her feel more real. And it was always good morning, beautiful every day. And when he finally asked for money, she stopped contact, blocked him. But what I found so interesting was she was heartbroken. She really missed that morning interaction.
Thank you, Dana, so much for calling. Yeah, does it go both ways, women and men? Did you find that?
Before I answer that, I can relate to that. Sometimes the scammers I talk to, their victims would tell them, I'm in love with your voice. I'm not in love with the person you pretend to be. So I can relate to that feeling because when you talk for so long with someone else, you just you build this bond. Going back to your initial question, I struggle with that question a lot because, these scammers sometimes also scam men. So they pretend to be white women online. And how can you talk to a man in, let's say, Arizona if you are a Nigerian man? So what they do is that they use their girlfriends, their Nigerian girlfriends, to talk to them on the phone. Now, of course, with the crisis and what happened in Nigeria, some of these girls thought, what if rather than helping my boyfriend and him getting all the money, I do it on my own? So in the book, I tell the story of 4 young men. But after a while, I found a young girl who is also scamming Americans. And my findings are that she has to be more reckless than anybody else. And in a way, I think she's smarter than all of the characters combined.
John is calling from New Brunswick. John, you're on the air.
Yeah, good afternoon. I am calling to find out if what can I do to help a good friend of mine who is being scammed, and she keeps sending Apple gift cards to the scammer. And she's under the impression she's buying properties, she's helping them financially. They suffer from harassment, they suffer because they are a minority, all kind of excuses.
Yeah. What can he do, Carlos, from your reporting? Is there anything he can do to help his friend?
Yeah, I gotta be honest because I've seen from the other side that these scammers sometimes they are scamming people and all their family and friends are telling them you're being scammed. The police go to their house and tell them you're being scammed. And the scammers would tell me the victim still sends money. So take it easy. I know that it's very hard. What I would try to do is just send them maybe a couple of articles on this and a couple of documentaries on the Yahoo Boys. I'm also reachable my Twitter account and my email. I'm happy to help. And definitely the gift cards is the method, the way scammers move money from country to country. So I would also try to be with that person as much as possible because the scammers prey on online people.
You paint a vivid picture of the effort required to be a successful scammer. They don't get a lot of sleep. They're on their phones all night to better align with Western time zones. This sounds like a weird question, but what did you observe about the toll to make ends as a romance scammer?
Well, in a way, it destroys the community. And that's why many local people, apart from obviously they know the impact on the victims, they don't like this Yahoo culture because they think that in the long term is destroying the community. Young people doing drugs. It's kind of like similar what happens to a town where young people start selling drugs.
Right, exactly.
And And it's quite a devastating picture because in the long run, unless they are smart enough to invest the money from their illicit gains, they keep getting the money and they keep wasting it until at some point they don't get the new update, as they call the new kind of scam that has evolved, and they stop receiving money and they haven't studied, they haven't learned a trade, and the picture is quite devastating.
The book, it's fascinating. It's called The Yahoo Boys, Love, Deception, and the Real Lives of Nigeria's Romance Scammers. It's by Carlos Barragan. Carlos, thank you for sharing your reporting.
No, of course. Thank you so much for having me here.